Good afternoon. I was just standing in the back. I don't know if any of you have Fitbits, but I have one. And my heart rate was up to 101, resting. My heart rate hasn't been that high since my first jump in airborne school. For my lawyers, I have to say that nothing I'm going to talk to you about today is endorsed by the Department of Defense or by the Department of the Army. Okay? These are based on my personal experiences. These are my own words. Okay? Now that's out the way. How many of you are veterans? Great. How many of you are family members of a vet? Great. On the day after Veterans Day, it's very important for me to get this out. We, as active duty military, cannot do what we do without you, families. I've had multiple tours to Iraq, Africa overseas, and it's nothing like getting an email, telephone call, a package, care package, operation. There's an operation of ladies that put these packages together, and there's cookies in there, there's like mittens and different things, books, magazines, and on there's a note that says, "We love you, thank you for what you do." So I will tell you, we live in an exceptional country, but our country is not exceptional not just because. It's exceptional because of the people that are here, you. I'm going to tell you a story about a young man who began life not some of the best circumstances. He was a product of divorce, and he was separated from his dad, lived with his mom. His mom ultimately moved to a low-income area, low-income housing, something akin to East Park Manor here in Muskegon. He struggled through some issues with the divorce, as most kids would, but he continued to work on grades. He was a pretty good reader. And then he ultimately moved with his dad. His dad had some concerns about his rambunctiousness in school. He recalls his teacher saying to his parents, "Don't worry about your son. He's talented, and he's going to be okay." Now, the reason why he knows that his teacher said this, while his parents were in the classroom, he was sitting out in the hallway where teachers make him sit. He overheard it. Teacher didn't know he heard it, but he overheard it. And like a drug, like a good cup of coffee, the euphoria went over this young man, and it propelled him throughout the rest of his life because of those encouraging words. Sometimes we have dark days. Sometimes we have struggles, and we have to make a way. And sometimes what we do is we hearken back to those words. I recall him telling me, basically, moving fast forward from 6th grade to high school. Did really well in high school, very popular kid, but he became a teen father his senior year. And he did what most teen boyfriends do. He married his high school sweetheart. Because he had a child to take care of, he decided that he would forego college and do something else. So he enlisted in the Army to take care of his family. He ultimately had another child, so he had 2 kids, and he was taking care of them as an enlisted soldier in the Army. But someone saw something in him that he didn't necessarily see in himself. They wanted him to apply for an ROTC scholarship. "Young man, you're talented, you should apply for an ROTC scholarship." He doubted himself. Now, don't get me wrong, he conveys the message that not just the words that his teacher uttered about 40 years ago about he's talented and he'll be okay. Those were not the only words of encouragement that he received, but those are the words he remembered because he didn't expect them. They came at a time where he wasn't necessarily at his best. So he hearkened back to those words, and he applied for an ROTC scholarship and received the scholarship and finished college. And in case you haven't already figured it out, that's me. I'm that boy. 37 years ago, Jeffers Elementary School, my teacher, Mr. Brown, told my parents, "Glennie is going to be okay." And ultimately, after 6th grade, Jeffers and Spring Lake moved to Muskegon Heights, where I'm a graduate in 1984. Sometimes we just need a hand up. It doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you end. Guys down at the bottom, guys pulling them up to the top. It doesn't matter where you start, where you end. Once I graduated from college, I decided, because at this time, as life happens, I was a single parent. I decided I would stay in the reserves, work a normal job, and that took me down south to Dallas, Texas, where I was raising my 2 sons and I worked as a juvenile probation officer. And then again, I started to, for some reason, harken back to the things I was taught as a young kid, not knowing where it came from. But I always wanted to encourage young people and people who work for me, give them the encouragement to do the things that they can actually do. Because sometimes we see the potential in people that they don't necessarily find in themselves. But it wasn't until the war started, after 9/11, I decided I would go back on active duty. And I did. I found myself in Iraq. And during that tour, I came across some challenges. But while I was challenging that, I had another challenge. I had a daughter who was in college. She said to me, Dad, I don't think college is for me. I think I'm going to drop out and do something else, maybe go to cosmetology school. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to do something else. College is just not for me. And what I did, as every parent would do, okay. No, I didn't. I said, listen, you have 2 options. One is make progression. The other is make excuses. None of your options are quitting. And I stand before you today to tell you she graduated from the University of Houston, magna cum laude, and she's in Asia now doing great work, humanitarian work now today. So sometimes the nice words, sometimes the tough words, it just depends. You just got to draw the balance. So I'll take you forward. I'm in Iraq. 2005, 2006. I'm there. This is the height of all the activity in Iraq. All the bad things are happening. So at this point, I am the operations officer. I'm in charge of 800 soldiers. And I have a facility that I'm charged with closing and moving 5,000 displaced civilians from one facility to another. And each time, a month out, as military do, we say 1 month. As things get closer to execution, we have more meetings. So a month out, some of my superiors said, I don't really think your plan's going to work logistically. What about dangers, contingencies? So I went back, continued, weekly meetings. One superior actually told me, your plan stinks. More meetings, I was sitting with my staff, and I recall this so vividly. One of the superiors said to me, he said, I don't like your plan, and I actually don't think you know what you're doing. My staff moved away from me as if his words would impale them instead of me. They just moved away. But I will tell you, if you don't believe encouraging words can last your lifetime, I went back to my, what we call a chew, basically a bed with some running water and a modified Connex, 40-foot Connex. I went back to my chew, and I thought, how did I get here? Where am I going to go? I cannot let this situation define who I am and my legacy. I can't do that. So here you see the evidence. I got a letter from Major General Jack Gardner, who was the task force commander at that time. He wrote to me, and the letter reads, Glenn, thanks for the superb job you did with your unit. Exceptional job moving 5,000 displaced civilians from one facility to another. But it was those words that I got 40 years ago that helped me through that. Another time, my second tour in Iraq, deployed from Fort Hood, so the governor of Texas, any units that deploy, the governor, they have what they call a GODEL, it's called a governor delegation, comes over, visits the troops. Very, very uplifting for morale. We're going through a difficult time, if you could all recall, 2010, 2011, where there was a lot of information out, well, are the Iraqis ready to take over? They have a fledgling democracy. Can they do it alone? Can they go it alone? And I remember Rick Perry's words to me. He said, Burks, you and your soldiers are doing a fine job. Continue to make America proud. And Texas is proud of you too. Words to that effect. I remember that. Had a successful tour. That ended in 2010. As I traveled over the United States, all over the United States and the world, I've hearkened back to different words that I've heard and places that I've visited, because I will tell you, we do live on in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. But my second country is Portugal, and you'll see pictures of Portugal in here as I go through. But my second best state outside of Michigan is New York, particularly Niagara Falls. I also recall a young man, I watched the movie and I read the book, called Unbroken. If you recall the movie, Louis Zamperini, he had all sorts of trouble growing up as a kid. He was in trouble, parents were concerned about him. It was his older brother that gave him words that took him through 47 days at sea after being shot down, and over 2 years in a prisoner of war camp, a Japanese prisoner of war camp in the Pacific. His brother said to him, if you can take it, you can make it. And those words resonated throughout the book. It resonated throughout the movie. I began to ponder. I began to think, how can I do more with all that has been given to me? You see, I think I have done well because of where I've been and where I grew up, not in spite of it. But it was because of encouraging words that I got. And words are priceless, yet cost nothing. So if I do nothing else today, I want to call all of you to action and talk to some child, some young adult who's at risk. My nephew, he doesn't know I know this, but his mom called me, and she said to me, she said, your nephew, he's a sophomore at Saginaw Valley State. She said, your nephew is thinking about quitting school. He doesn't know this yet, but we're going to have lunch tomorrow, and I'm going to have a very, very strong talk with him. Because words will always stay with you, just like a hand in hand, grasping of a hand, they stay with you. They stay with you, and they can carry you through tough times. It's another picture of Niagara Falls. I'll tell you another story. My grandson, who's now he's 7 years old, but it was a couple years ago. Like his grandfather, he's rambunctious, very smart, loquacious, but a very active little boy. And he came home one weekend, and we were together, and he said, he calls me Bopa. It stayed with him when he was little. He couldn't say Grandpa, so he calls me Bopa. He said, Bopa, my teacher told me that because I love reading and I love history, my fascination with history and Lego and science fiction, I too can be president of the United States. Yeah. I know why the teacher told him that, because you all know that teachers have this uncanny ability to catch children when they're not at their best, but talk to them about their potential. And he heard those words probably when he wasn't doing his best and gave him those words. And I tell you, right, even to this day, he still talks about that. He went to visit the White House, the Smithsonian. He wanted to go see the president. I told him, hey, no, since 9/11, we can't get that close. We have to get tickets, and on and on. But he is a good kid, and he is doing quite well. Kipling wrote, words, of course, are the most powerful drug used by mankind. Will you use words as a drug to help propel someone to the next level? If I leave you with nothing else, I want you to remember my story. I want you to think about who has helped you through life. Give them a call. Tell them, as I did with Mr. Brown. I called him. I said, Mr. Brown, I want to thank you for everything you did for me. Those words that you said to me, it saved my life. He had no idea what I was talking about, but he did remember me. And he left me with some other words to think about as I've just turned 50. And you know, the life cycle of human beings, usually 70, so 2/3 of my life is over, so I got to figure out what I'm going to do with the next third, okay? He said to me, Glennie, before you know it, you're going to be an old man. You have to do as much good on this earth as you can while you're here. So I will tell you, work with me, go out, encourage kids, especially at-risk kids and adults. Because one sentence, one word, one idea, one dream, one man, one woman can truly change the world. Thank you.